Common sense. It's a concept so simple, so seemingly universal, that we assume everyone operates with the same understanding. We use it to make decisions, navigate social situations, and form opinions about the world around us. But what if this very foundation of reason isn't as common as we think? What if our understanding of common sense is shaped by centuries of ingrained biases and societal norms that have historically disadvantaged entire groups of people, particularly women? This exploration isn't about pointing fingers or igniting blame. It's about holding up a mirror to the often invisible structures that shape our perceptions and influence our judgments. It's about acknowledging that what seems perfectly logical and straightforward to one person can feel deeply unfair and oppressive to another. And it's about recognizing that true progress requires us to move beyond the limitations of our own perspectives and embrace a more inclusive understanding of what it means to exercise common sense. The fight for women's rights is not a new phenomenon. It's a struggle woven into the very tapestry of human history. For centuries, women have been denied basic rights and freedoms, treated as property, and relegated to the domestic sphere. Their voices have been silenced, their experiences invalidated, and their contributions to society minimized. This historical context is crucial to understanding the complexities of the present-day fight for gender equality. From ancient civilizations to the modern era, patriarchal structures have permeated societies across the globe. Women were often excluded from education, political participation, and economic opportunities. Their roles were primarily confined to the home, raising children and managing the household, while men held the reins of power and decision-making. This imbalance of power created a fertile ground for discrimination and prejudice to flourish. The fight for suffrage, the right to vote, was a long and arduous battle. Women organized, protested, and faced imprisonment and violence in their pursuit of political representation. Their courage and determination paved the way for future generations to challenge gender norms and demand equality. Even with legal victories and societal shifts, the legacy of this historical inequality continues to cast a long shadow. The echoes of the past can be seen in persistent wage gaps, underrepresentation in leadership positions, and societal expectations that place disproportionate burdens on women. For centuries, marriage has been a cornerstone of societies worldwide, but it has also controlled women's lives through arranged marriages. Women have been denied the autonomy to choose their partners, their futures traded for land, peace treaties, or tradition. This denial of choice is a fundamental violation of human rights. The consequences can be devastating, leading to depression and isolation. This practice has no place in a modern society that values liberty and equality. Education is often hailed as the great equalizer, the key that unlocks opportunities and empowers individuals to reach their full potential. Yet, throughout history, access to education has been systematically denied to women, creating a persistent gender gap that has had far-reaching consequences for both individuals and society as a whole. For centuries, women were excluded from institutions of higher learning, their minds deemed too fragile for intellectual pursuits, or their primary purpose relegated to domestic duties. This deliberate denial of education served to keep women economically dependent on men and to reinforce their perceived inferiority in the public sphere. The lack of educational opportunities has had a ripple effect throughout generations. Women without access to education were less likely to participate in the workforce, earn a living wage, or contribute to the economic and social progress of their communities. This cycle of disadvantage perpetuated gender inequality and stifled innovation and growth. Even as formal barriers to education have crumbled, subtle forms of discrimination persist. Girls may be discouraged from pursuing STEM fields, steered towards more feminine subjects, or face implicit bias in the classroom. These systemic barriers, often invisible to the untrained eye, continue to limit women's educational attainment and their ability to compete on an equal footing in a rapidly changing world. Section 3. Property rights and economic dependence, a legacy of inequality. The ability to own property and control one's own finances is fundamental to individual autonomy and empowerment. Yet for much of history, women have been denied these basic rights, relegated to a position of economic dependence on men. This lack of economic agency has had a profound impact on women's lives, limiting their choices and shaping their experiences in countless ways. Under legal systems that favored male inheritance and property ownership, women were often treated as chattel, their belongings becoming their husbands upon marriage. This economic vulnerability made it difficult for women to leave unhappy or abusive marriages, as they lacked the financial resources to support themselves or their children. Even as women entered the workforce, they faced significant obstacles, including wage discrimination, limited job opportunities, and societal expectations that prioritized men's careers. These systemic barriers created a persistent gender pay gap, making it more difficult for women to achieve financial independence and security. The legacy of this historical inequality continues to shape the economic realities of women today. Women remain underrepresented in leadership positions, face challenges securing funding for businesses, and are more likely to live in poverty than men. Addressing these disparities requires dismantling the systemic barriers that prevent women from fully participating in the economy and achieving financial equity. Section 4. The Cult of Domesticity, Confining Women to the Home. The 19th century's cult of domesticity glorified women's roles as wives and mothers, confining them to the home. This ideology emphasized piety, purity, submissiveness, and domesticity. It limited women's opportunities and reinforced their subordinate status. Women were expected to be moral guardians of the home. Their days were consumed with childcare, cooking, and cleaning. Education and intellectual pursuits were often discouraged. This confinement had far-reaching consequences. Women were denied opportunities for personal growth and economic independence. Their voices were silenced in the public square. The cult of domesticity reinforced patriarchal structures. Its legacy continues to shape societal expectations about gender roles. Women today still bear the brunt of unpaid domestic labor. Challenging these norms is essential to achieving true gender equality. Section 1. The Persistent Wage Gap, Equal Work, Unequal Pay. Despite progress, the gender wage gap persists. Women earn less than men for the same jobs, especially women of color. This gap devalues women's work, forcing them to work harder for financial security. Addressing this requires stronger laws, pay transparency, and challenging biases. Closing the gap is about fairness and equity for all. The maternal wall balancing motherhood and career ambitions. Motherhood is transformative, filled with joy and purpose. Yet it often collides with rigid workplace expectations. The maternal wall describes workplace discrimination mothers face. From hostility to microaggressions, mothers navigate double standards. They may be seen as less committed, passed over for promotions. Single mothers often bear the brunt without partner support. Lack of affordable childcare worsens challenges for working mothers. Many must choose between careers and families due to costs. This lack of support impacts women and the economy. A supportive workplace needs a shift in attitudes and policies. Paid leave, flexible work, and on-site childcare are essential. Dismantling the maternal wall helps mothers reach their potential. Navigating a male-dominated workplace. The challenges of visibility and recognition. In many industries and sectors, women continue to be underrepresented, particularly in leadership positions. This lack of representation creates a host of challenges for women navigating male-dominated workplaces, where their voices may be silenced, their contributions overlooked, and their authority questioned. From boardrooms to construction sites, women often find themselves the only woman in the room, their presence met with surprise, skepticism, or even outright hostility. This sense of isolation can be compounded by a lack of female mentors and role models, leaving women feeling unsupported and unsure of how to navigate the often unspoken rules of the game. In these environments, women may struggle to have their ideas heard and their contributions recognized. Their voices may be drowned out in meetings, their suggestions dismissed, or their accomplishments attributed to male colleagues. This lack of visibility can have a demoralizing effect, leading to a loss of confidence and a reluctance to speak up or assert themselves. Breaking down the barriers that keep women from rising to positions of leadership requires a concerted effort to challenge the status quo and create a more inclusive and equitable workplace culture. This includes implementing diversity and inclusion initiatives, providing mentorship and sponsorship opportunities for women, and holding leaders accountable for creating environments where women feel valued, respected, and empowered to succeed. Unconscious bias, the invisible barrier to advancement. Unconscious bias refers to implicit assumptions and stereotypes we hold about different groups, often without realizing it. These biases, shaped by our upbringing and experiences, influence our perceptions and decisions. In the workplace, unconscious bias creates barriers to advancement for women and underrepresented groups. Addressing unconscious bias requires awareness, challenging stereotypes, and implementing strategies to mitigate bias. By acknowledging and addressing our biases, we can create a more equitable workplace. The #MeToo movement, a global phenomenon that erupted in 2017, shattered the silence surrounding sexual harassment and assault, empowering survivors to share their stories and demand accountability. This activism exposed the systemic power imbalances that have long allowed abusers to act with impunity. However, alongside this reckoning came a wave of backlash, a testament to the deeply ingrained resistance to dismantling patriarchal structures. Critics accused the movement of being a witch hunt, ruining men's lives based on unsubstantiated allegations and creating a climate of fear and distrust. This backlash reflects a discomfort with the shifting power dynamics that the #MeToo movement represents. The backlash, while disheartening, is a reminder that dismantling deeply ingrained systems of oppression requires ongoing vigilance and commitment. Women in positions of power often face a unique form of backlash, the politics of fear. This tactic seeks to undermine women's credibility, discredit their ideas, and discourage them from participating in the public sphere. From the political arena to the corporate boardroom, women who speak out against injustice are often met with hostility and attempts to silence their voices. They may be labeled as aggressive or emotional, terms used to undermine their authority. This constant undermining can chip away at women's confidence, making them less likely to speak up in the future. Creating a more equitable world requires dismantling the politics of fear and creating spaces where women feel safe and empowered to share their ideas. The term Karen, originally used to describe entitled demanding behavior, has morphed into a tool to silence women, particularly white women, who challenge the status quo. This evolution, while rooted in critiques of privilege, has become a double-edged sword, often used to shut down conversations and dismiss legitimate concerns. The weaponization of Karen has created a chilling effect, making women hesitant to speak out for fear of being labeled as such. This fear of ridicule and social ostracism can be particularly acute online, where the term is often used for shaming and harassment. While it's important to address entitled behavior, the indiscriminate use of Karen risks undermining these efforts by creating a climate of fear. When women are afraid to speak up, we all lose out on valuable insights and opportunities for growth. Women often navigate a world fraught with double standards, held to different expectations, and judged more harshly than men for the same actions. One pervasive double standard is the expectation of emotional labor, where women are expected to be nurturing and empathetic, often at the expense of their own well-being. Men, on the other hand, are given more leeway to express emotions like anger without facing the same social penalties. Another double standard is the scrutiny women face for their appearance, which can undermine their credibility and make it more difficult for them to be taken seriously. These double standards create a burden of proof for women, forcing them to constantly justify their actions and prove their worth. Challenging these double standards requires a collective effort to raise awareness and advocate for more equitable treatment. In many professional settings, men's ideas often take center stage, while women's contributions struggle to break through the noise. This phenomenon is often a result of unconscious bias, where ideas presented by men are perceived as more credible or authoritative. This bias can manifest in subtle ways, from body language to interrupting women during meetings. Over time, this pattern creates a demoralizing environment for women, making them less likely to share their ideas or pursue leadership opportunities. When women's voices are silenced, organizations miss out on valuable perspectives and innovative solutions. Creating a more equitable workplace requires challenging unconscious biases and amplifying marginalized voices. The legal system, like other societal institutions, is not immune to gender bias. This bias is particularly evident in cases of sexual assault and domestic violence, where survivors often face skepticism and blame. Women's testimonies are often scrutinized more harshly than men's, with factors like behavior and clothing choices unfairly influencing perceptions. This bias extends beyond violence cases, affecting custody disputes and other legal areas. Addressing gender bias in the legal system requires educating legal professionals about implicit bias and advocating for reforms. Ensuring justice is served fairly and equitably is crucial for a just society. From a young age, we receive messages about competence and success, often intertwined with traditional notions of masculinity. Men are seen as natural leaders, while women are stereotyped as nurturing and risk-averse, creating a perception gap. This myth of male competence limits women's career opportunities and perpetuates the gender gap in leadership positions. Men may be promoted based on potential, while women must prove their competence through experience. This perception gap is particularly challenging for women in male-dominated fields, where they face skepticism and must constantly prove themselves. Challenging this myth requires recognizing and addressing unconscious biases that favor men. The term Karen, in its current cultural context, began as a way to describe entitled, demanding behavior, typically exhibited by white women. However, it quickly evolved into a problematic stereotype, often used to label any assertive woman. This overgeneralization strips the stereotype of its original nuance, transforming it into a tool for silencing dissent. The Karen stereotype now operates as a way to dismiss women's voices and concerns without meaningful dialogue. It serves as a convenient label to categorize and dismiss an entire group of people based on perceived characteristics. Addressing the root causes of frustration requires engaging in meaningful conversations and avoiding harmful stereotypes. Section 2, the silencing effect. How stereotypes discourage women from speaking out. Stereotypes oversimplify realities, reducing individuals to caricatures. The Karen stereotype silences women, dismissing their concerns. This effect is worse for marginalized women, compounding their struggles. When women are afraid to speak out, society loses valuable perspectives. Dismantling stereotypes is crucial for a just world. Section 3. Reclaiming the narrative, moving beyond harmful stereotypes. The Karen stereotype presents an opportunity for reflection and growth. Engage with the stereotype critically, unpack its origins, and reclaim the narrative to empower. Acknowledge entitlement and privilege and recognize systems of power and oppression. Move beyond labels, foster empathy, and amplify marginalized voices for a just world. Create spaces where all feel safe, respected, and empowered to contribute to an inclusive society. Section 1. A complex intersection, where rights and fairness collide. The world of sports often mirrors broader societal debates. The inclusion of transgender athletes, especially transgender women, in women's sports sparks heated discussions. This issue intersects human rights, fairness, and evolving gender identities. Balancing dignity and fairness is crucial. The debate involves beliefs about gender, biology, and sports. Some argue physical advantages create an uneven playing field. Others believe excluding transgender women is discriminatory. Open, respectful dialogue is needed. Listen to experiences, understand science, and acknowledge complexities. Aim for an inclusive and fair sporting landscape. The biology of sport, navigating the terrain of physical differences. The human body is a marvel of complexity, shaped by genetics, hormones, and environment. Biological factors influence strength, speed, and endurance in sports. Understanding sex and gender differences is crucial in the debate on transgender inclusion. Testosterone impacts muscle growth and bone density, affecting athletic performance. Hormone replacement therapy can alter physical characteristics in transgender women. Navigating this terrain requires a nuanced approach, considering individual circumstances and scientific evidence. Inclusion versus competition, the quest for a level playing field. Achieving fairness in sports is complex, with diverse physical attributes and resources impacting performance. The inclusion of transgender athletes challenges traditional fairness, prompting a search for balanced solutions. Some argue it disadvantages cisgender women, while others see it as affirming transgender rights. Moving forward requires nuanced solutions that balance fairness and inclusion. Open dialogue, open minds, fostering understanding and finding common ground. The debate on transgender inclusion in sports is emotional and complex. Open, respectful dialogue is crucial. Listening to transgender athletes' experiences fosters understanding. Their voices are essential to the conversation. Engaging with the science of gender is also important. Policies should be developed with input from all stakeholders. Creating an inclusive sporting landscape requires ongoing dialogue and open minds. Common sense, a call to action. The fight for gender equality is a collective struggle to create a just society where everyone is valued and empowered. True equality requires a level playing field, free from outdated stereotypes and systemic barriers. It's about creating a world where every voice is heard, valued, and respected. By embracing empathy and common sense, we can build a future where everyone thrives.